Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 39.
Episode 39. So this is the part of the podcast where I do bad at numbers. And ladies and gentlemen, Ben, my dear co-host, has been so polite as to call me out. Call me to the carpet on the show notes. So I log in today. I'm setting up my station, getting ready to record a podcast, have a friendly conversation with one of my best friends. And what do I see in the show notes but a highlighted section underneath my bad at numbers segment that says,
just reminding you to prepare bad at numbers.
And I quote, "Some nonsense Josh Googled 5 minutes before we started." End quote. Not only did he write that in my section of the notes, he highlighted it yellow just to be sure I wouldn't miss it.
I thought I was quoting you. Isn't that what you say bad at numbers is?
Ben, I'm allowed to make fun of me, but you don't get
to
call stuff out like that. That's ridiculous.
All right, well, tell us about the number 39.
So what the interesting thing that I found about the number 39 is there were 39 people that signed the original U.S. Constitution.
Okay.
And now, Ben, for calling me out so blatantly in the show notes, I'm going to call you out on the podcast. I have 2 questions for you. Let's see if you can answer them.
All right.
Okay. So, 39 people signed the U.S. Constitution. Yes?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So there were 13 colonies at the time that became states.
Okay, 39 is divisible by 13.
Well, no. Can you name... This is my first 2 questions. Can you name the 13 colonies at the time of the signing of the U.S. Constitution?
Wait, does that mean that there were 3 representatives from each state that signed?
We're not talking...
All right. Okay, let me try. Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Connecticut, Delaware. I'm running out. I got 9.
I think you said Connecticut twice, but it's...
Rhode Island.
There's one. Yep. All right, so we got Connecticut, Delaware. You got that one. Georgia, Maryland. I don't know if you said
I didn't say Maryland.
Massachusetts, New Hampshire, state nobody thinks about, New Jersey.
I stopped thinking about it already.
New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Carolina.
Oh, New York. Oh, son of a...
Rhode Island, and Virginia.
All right.
Okay. Now, to answer your other question, no. There were not 3 representatives from each state. It was kind of all over the place.
Okay, so 39 and 13, whatever. There's no relationship, even though they're numerically related.
That's right. Now, here's my next question. There's 39 people signed. Can you name 5 of them?
Well, I know John Hancock signed first with that beautiful loopy signature that's become so famous it's synonymous with having nice handwriting.
John Hancock did indeed sign the U.S. Declaration of Independence. He did not sign the U.S. Constitution.
All right. So I feel like Indiana Jones on the Last Crusade. Okay, I need to spell Jehovah. J.
And he immediately screwed up with his superb confidence.
Yeah, you aren't going to name them all, are you? I can't name 5 signing. I mean, I can guess. Ben Franklin, George Washington, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, and Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr did not sign, but those are good. The first 4 you got, that was really solid. And honestly, what's really funny is this is kind of a trick question because I feel like anybody that's kind of a history buff could name those 4 people and nobody else that's on this list. Like, for example, 2 of the South Carolina delegates was Charles Pinckney and Charles Coatsworth Pinckney. I think they were the Pinckney brothers from South Carolina.
We are not relation.
Nobody's ever heard of these 2.
Yeah.
Oh, and then one of my favorite facts while I was researching this was Rhode Island didn't send any delegates to the Constitutional Convention. Thanks for nothing, Rhode Island.
I guess that answers about 39 being divisible by 13.
Yes. Virginia sent 3. South Carolina sent 4.
Pennsylvania
does that mean
someone from Rhode Island could say that they're not subject to the Constitution because they didn't sign it? But I guess there's also 37 other states that didn't sign it either.
Well, there was the whole process after they signed the Constitution where it had to get ratified by the states.
All right. So Rhode Island is the only one that has an asterisk.
All right. So for calling me out in the show notes, I called you out on your American history.
Well done.
Shame on you.
1 point for Ben, 1 point for Josh. So last time we talked about dress codes, which is an interesting little talk. But we cited something that's become of a bit of an urban legend. And since we talked, I actually looked it up. And I want to give the straight dope on the dress code urban legend, and that is that some company had a big dress code and cut it down. Here's what it was. It was back in the early 2000s. General Motors was in rough shape, and it was taken over by CEO Mary Barra, and she axed the corporate dress code from 10 pages to 2 words: dress appropriately. So,
which is an HR nightmare.
Yeah, the basic facts of that story are really good. What I didn't know, and I found out in researching this, is why she did it.
Why did she do it, Ben?
Quote, she took a linguistic machete to the policy as part of a desire to change company culture, recalled Barra, who later in 2014 became the company's CEO. It was a chance to send a message that big didn't have to mean bureaucratic. And yet some high-ranking managers who'd been used to the longer, much more complicated, comprehensive policy pushed back. To them, quote, dress appropriately sounded in practice like another 2-word phrase, anything goes, which, if I remember correctly, is almost exactly what you said in objection to this and repeated just now before I started. I like what she said she was getting at here, though. It was she was trying to change the culture of the corporation. Like, you don't come in as a CEO to a corporation that's failing and try to maintain the status quo. It's why a new general will come in and like change the uniform that the military is wearing. He wants to shake things up a bit, show people that it's going to be different under his leadership.
But you see, this is that kind of token gesture drives me nuts because I spent
not a token gesture.
But this is the thing, Ben. It is because this Mary Barra and that general you're talking about, they don't have to deal with the repercussions of the changes that they're making at their level.
It's not that bad.
It's
definitely not as bad as piloting a failed company into the ground until it fails in bankruptcy because you didn't care enough to actually take extreme measures.
Extreme measures about the dress code? Look, take extreme measures about operations. Take extreme measures about fiscal responsibility. Dress code. I'm done. I'm going to fight you on this hill.
I am going to die on this hill. Let me tell you why. If I write an eloquent mission statement that defines the soul of my company and fill up books with it and create PowerPoint presentations and slides and stuff, every employee in my company can ignore that and not care and it not change the culture one bit. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. But if I change what you wear when you get up in the morning, I am having an influence on every single employee every single day.
All right, General Rich. Take your eyes off the sunny sunset horizon for a second. Look down here in the mire that the rest of us got to live in. You, Mr. Slash the dress code to dress appropriately, has now increased my workload, my middle manager workload, by at least 20 working hours a month, having to deal with all of the employee BS that now comes from not having a strict dress code.
I think you're wrong about that, but I didn't find any sources that give data one way or the other about that.
This is my point that I'm trying to say, is the people at the top, like you said, they come in and make these gestures because they want to mix things up and change things. And this is what drives me nuts, is you've lived through this 100 times in the military, and
yes.
but you're just still so idealistic. You don't get it. Whenever it happened to me, whenever some big sweeping change would happen, and I was just the guy in the middle, all I saw was, okay, great. This guy wants another bullet.
Here's some new general trying to make his mark.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, here's me trying to do the mission, and now I've got to learn and teach a new set of requirements to all of my dudes.
Yeah, I had a bad experience with this early in my career. If you remember, about 2005, the Air Force decided they want to get on board with something the Army had done and institute an official physical training uniform, which didn't exist prior to that point in the entire history of the U.S. Air Force. When you were doing physical training, they just kind of give you some vague guidance, and it probably caused a lot of problems. And they want us to look the same all the time. So they actually issued a standardized Air Force uniform, which went through some growing pains, but I kind of liked the idea and where we ended up. We have a gray T-shirt with silver reflective marks on it and some blue shorts, and we look like the new version of the Air Force logo. I
always hated those shorts because whoever designed them was clearly a baby boomer, because they are like 70s track pants. They come they're very, very high shorts, listeners. And then second, not only did they design the shorts to be short, but that whatever subcontractor that they hired to manufacture these shorts, like, you know what? we could probably shave a half a centimeter off of the length of these cuffs and nobody know the difference, and we'll save millions in production costs. So then they got even shorter, Ben. Like, these pants are teeny tiny. I'm a tall guy, and I feel inappropriate wearing those tiny shorts.
I'm sure it was shocking to everyone, except that everyone was wearing it, and so no one was paying attention to you.
I had some issues with doing some of the stretches at PT and how exposed I felt as a large person.
Here's the story I wanted to tell. So at the time that this came out, I was in the same unit as you, but I think you hadn't arrived yet. And I was in the role called the operations officer. The commander has a front office. This was a particularly large unit that we were in, and so he needed an extra person in his front office in addition to his deputy and his secretary to just help manage the flow of the office. And usually what went to the operations officer was all of the orders that were coming down from on high, making sure that they were read, acknowledged, and filtered down to the right people. And when something like a change to the uniform came out, like, hey, we're about to institute an Air Force-wide PT uniform, that came down to the ops officer. He processed it, sent it out to the whole unit, and then started to plan how our unit was going to institute this. So I remember getting that, reading it, sending it out to the whole unit, everyone going and buying their PT gear. And the first time we had unit PT, we went out, and I was doing a thing at the time I thought was good leadership, and I've since abandoned entirely, and that is correcting someone else that I see that I think is wearing the uniform improperly. They teach you this in basic training, that this is good officership, this is good leadership, to correct someone who you think they're wearing the uniform improperly. So here's what happened. I corrected this junior airman on their wear of the uniform, and they dutifully thanked me for the correction, went back to their office, and forwarded me my own email with the right instructions in it.
That's the thing. If you're going to call somebody out like that, you better know that document's forward and backwards, sir.
Yeah.
I remember I was wearing that PT uniform when I was deployed to Afghanistan at an Army base. And at the time, the Air Force requirements did not, you didn't have to tuck in the shirt.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, in the Army, boy, you had to tuck in the shirt.
So they didn't like having an Air Force guy around looking slovenly compared to them?
Yeah, I was walking around with my workout gear with the shirt untucked, and whoa, man, did I get some talking to.
Did you get lit up by a sergeant major or something?
Not lit up, but definitely stern. Tuck in your shirt, and then I always look back and I'm just as stern, I'm in the Air Force, and just keep walking.
Those years at the academy just changed you, man.
Oh, right when I got out of the academy, the cynicism was so high, everything just rolled off. It's whatever, man.
It was weird because when you came out, I'd been commissioned officer for a year longer than you, but you'd been in the Air Force for 3 years longer than me. So we were both just second lieutenants, but you had this unearthly jadedness that wasn't common for guys like me that walked in off the street and were like, okay, I'll correct junior airmen if I see them not wearing the uniform properly.
Well, and you were also an idealist. When I went into the academy, I was very much like you. I went in there thinking that everybody was going to be high speed and super motivated and high five and yeah, getting it done. And when it wasn't like that, not only was it not like that, it was the polar opposite of that. I kind of got dragged down to the level of everybody else, which is a remark about myself. I shouldn't have let that happen to me. I should have stayed bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like you did, Ben. And you're still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as a major. You're still trying to call the Wendy's manager to fix his app. You're still trying to call the deployment manager to make sure the guy coming in behind you doesn't have to get a shot that he doesn't need.
I compartmentalize my bushy-tailedness. like this week, one of my peers told me that at the halfway mark of my tour, I needed to start drafting my document that's used to provide feedback to my leadership about my performance of my duties on this deployment, and I told him to just shove it up his place.
Well, because you need that time, Ben. If your report is due on this date, then the guy right above you has to have a month to review that.
I am not doing my boss's work for him 3 months in advance. No, thank you. I'm not doing that.
And what are they going to do to you? Force you to retire and send you to Louisiana?
Not promote me to lieutenant colonel? Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, culture change is hard. Okay, so there's another thing I want to follow up on from last time. And again, this is something that I said offhandedly, did some research on, and found out. So the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH for short, defines what's called the hierarchy of controls.
Hang on a second. Is this different from OSHA? How many safety organizations do we have?
OSHA, I think, is an international organization. I think this is the U.S. arm of it.
Because, of course, OSHA, the international version is not good enough. We have to have
I don't know.
the American spin on
Now
it.
I'm just talking out of my butt. This is, whatever, the NIOSH standards for controlling safety hazards. So when you've identified a safety hazard, what do? If it's something that you can just do away with entirely, obviously that's preferable. So there's this hierarchy of controls that you can apply to a hazard. It's expressed, and I put it in the show notes from last week, I'll put it in the show notes for this week as well. It's expressed as an inverted pyramid with the broadest part on the top. And at the top of the pyramid are the things that are the most effective and the most influential on the risk. And at the bottom of the pyramid are the things that are the least effective and the least influential on the risk. But
they're probably cheaper. I imagine the simplicity of implementation increases as the pyramid gets smaller.
Exactly. I mean, there's a reason you don't just always do the thing at the bottom. So they are in decreasing order of effectiveness: elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE, or personal protective equipment. So let's go through this real fast, because when you eliminate or substitute something, that's basically the idea that you can just completely do away with the danger. I don't know, like falling rocks. There's rocks on top of that cliff. They're falling off and hitting people. We'll take them away. All right, now there are no more rocks on top of that cliff. Great.
Yeah, we can shut down the highway. We can send some demolition teams up there. We can blow up the rocks. Then we can clear all of the rubble away and then smooth it to a grade where the rocks will never fall down again.
And put a big metal cage on top of it or whatever. You can just completely eliminate the risk.
Okay.
There's substitution. That's like, okay, well,
we'll build a road that goes somewhere else, not past those.
Yes. Yeah. Build a road that goes around it. Then there's engineering controls. That's just we'll put up a steel fence next to the road so that if rocks fall off, they don't tumble onto the road.
Whenever I drive past those big steel fences, or the ones that are even riveted or bolted into the cliff wall, I always get way more nervous than the cliff walls that don't have them. Yeah, it just reminds me somebody determined that this is dangerous enough to warrant extra protection. Yeah. This makes me uncomfortable.
Then there's administrative controls. We know that the rocks mostly tend to fall during April and October, so during those months we'll send a guy out there and he'll watch, and if he sees some rocks falling, he'll wave at the oncoming cars.
Okay, so some kind of procedural change that otherwise everything else just goes on as normal.
Yeah, and then there's PPE, personal protective equipment. You can only drive through this falling rock area if your car has a roll cage. I don't know.
So, what's really funny about this is I have a real-world example that I can talk about, which I find personally very hilarious. Nobody else does, but I do, so I'm going to talk about it.
Uh-huh.
So, on the way to my parents' house, I don't know if you remember this road or not, but it's a really weird road. It's like a shared road. It's not a public road. It's not a city road. It's a private access road, and so all of the people in the neighborhood have to pitch in to keep it maintained. And very recently, they all pitched in the money finally, and they got it. They got this road paved. It used to be
when I went there last, it was a dirt road.
Yeah, now it is paved. Well, what's funny is you go down this road and it goes to a T intersection. Well, dead smack in the center of this T intersection is one of those phone line, Cox cable junction boxes. You see them. They're a couple feet tall. They're, just like a fiberglass enclosure.
Yeah, I remember. It was right smack in the middle of the road.
Yes. And what's funny is they had a big meeting and they were talking about this thing because somebody hit it at some point and it knocked out phone service for everybody.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because my dad was very adamant. It's if we just knock it over 2 or 3 more times, then the phone company will come out and they'll have to move it 6 feet out of the road because that's the logical thing that makes sense. And I immediately countered because I am the jaded, cynical, pessimistic guy that I am. And I go, no, Dad, that's not what they're going to do because that would require time and effort. What they would do is put one of those steel concrete-filled pillars right in front of it. So that way, if you did hit it with your car, you would just mess up your car and their junction box would be fine.
Yeah, but they probably also put reflective tape on it.
Yeah, something like that. But this is the difference. The elimination would be obviously the thing that is the right thing to do. but very expensive and time consuming. They would have to dig up the road and move it and then repave the road, whatever. When it's a lot easier to throw in this PPE or engineering control by just putting a pillar that would stop a car from hurting their little box.
Right, and sometimes not even an option. Like, what if they said, okay, just don't drive down this street anymore, and your dad's like, I live at the end of that street. That's not an option.
Yeah, there's no administrative control that's going to fix this.
Or don't drive at night down on this street. Like, that's not an option either. You got to come up with another way to do this.
Yeah, well, so far nothing has happened. Nobody hits it anymore, but I think about running it over every time I drive to my parents' house, just for funsies. It's like, this stupid little box.
So let's talk about this in the context of transmission of the coronavirus.
Okay, you want to start at the bottom and work our way up? We want to start with the cheapest plot?
Let's start at elimination, the most expensive, most assured ways of preventing transmission, and work down to PPE.
Elimination of the virus at this point, from my limited understanding of biomechanics and bioorganics, would be to have everybody on the planet Earth stay in their house for 2 straight weeks until the virus was completely eliminated.
Right.
It burned itself out. It's not transferred to any new hosts. It's over. Done.
Right.
Gone forever.
And I can't really think of a substitution option, but yes, that would eliminate it entirely. Physically remove the hazard. The virus is not being transmitted in the wild any longer. Everyone's safe. But like we've talked about with these, that the cost of that is astronomical. Like maybe not even possible.
No, it's absolutely not possible because people don't listen to the lowest end of this pyramid.
It's not about people not listening. There's reasons.
It's absolutely about people not listening.
You just said every person on Earth. I mean, there's bound to be reasons.
Yeah, but we're talking about the elimination of a virus on a global scale. I get it,
but
it's got to be a
little.
Did
this in a strict economic way where you said, all right, everyone stay home, and if you're a person that needs to go pick up your insulin, then you just deserve to die because the cost of this disease is going to be greater than that.
We're not going to. All right, so yes, I'm going to willingly admit that what I just said is completely impractical, which is why it's at the top of this pyramid. The cost is astronomical, like you're talking about. And there are a billion rabbit holes like the one that you just pointed out that completely destroy my straw man.
Right.
But you didn't ask me for a perfect solution. You asked me for how to do it.
Okay, but we can do this some of the time. Stay home as much as you can. And they have been facilitating this. Like, for instance, the fact that my children's school took some of those fossil school teachers that have, barely even know how to work a mouse and make them teach over Zoom is amazing, to say the least.
Well, you see, now that's interesting because I don't consider that elimination. I consider that substitution. There are things that you have to do to go out into the world, and we are replacing those with online methods.
I'm calling it elimination, though, for the purpose of transmitting a virus because it's the same outcome, not going to the school.
Ooh, we're gonna get real deep into the nomenclature of your chart.
I grouped these two together. Elimination and substitution, while most effective at reducing hazards, also tend to be the most difficult to implement.
Well, yeah, no argument there.
Okay, engineering controls. What are some examples in relation to COVID you can think of engineering controls?
People taking their temperature before you come to the store, and if you have a temperature over 98.6...
that's an administrative control.
Oh, you're right, that is administrative control. Actual physical barriers to the virus.
Like those plastic things they've been putting up in the checkout lanes.
Yeah, grocery stores and things, yeah.
Plexiglass walls.
My boss purchased one of those for our conference table, which is ridiculous because it's still open on both sides.
Yeah, and there's a lot of very minuscule debates to be had about the effectiveness of particular methods. Sometimes they give the appearance of being an engineering control when in actuality they're just administrative control.
This is look at the thing that we did because of the thing. Aren't we caring about our clients and customers?
Yeah, and that's why down here at the bottom end of the pyramid where you get into the things that are less effective, that maybe isolate people from the hazard or change the way that they work or help protect them, are subject to perfect execution on the part of an individual. Like if you actually just stay in your house, that's it, success. But if you go out in public and you have on a mask and you're worrying about plexiglass and 6 foot and hand washing and stuff like that, germs are wily and really small and fly around, particularly this one. And it can overcome all of that.
Okay, said the guy who caught COVID ignoring all of the rules. Like, he wore a mask, ladies and gentlemen, but he was on roller coasters with people.
I did not ignore all the rules, and I want to be very clear about this since we're talking about this in the terms of this pyramid. I ignored the elimination and substitution rules, but I followed the engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. I did not violate any of those. I went to the designated areas before I was allowed to take off my mask. I washed my hands. I kept my mask on all the time. I did all those things, which just shows that at the bottom end of the pyramid, you do not fully eliminate the risk.
You're right. I was being unkind. I shouldn't have said those things. You followed the rules to the letter and just totally violated common sense. I understand. Got it. Thanks for the clarification.
All right. I'm done talking about the NIOSH hierarchy of controls in the context of COVID prevention.
I am 37 years old, Ben. I have never heard of NIOSH, and I'm all about bureaucracy over here. So this is interesting that this safety bureaucratic thing came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Who are these people? I don't think they're real. This is a website that somebody put up on the weekend.
It's a made-up government acronym.
Well, so this is a ridiculous tangent, but have you heard of the thriving community around the Microsoft Flight Simulator games?
No.
Okay, so
I know that Microsoft Flight Simulator has existed for 30 years, but
yes.
What's the thriving community?
So here's the thing, is that Microsoft Flight Simulator is notoriously realistic, super hyper-realistic for having how to actually fly a whole slew of different planes that they've built in.
That's been their thing.
There is a thriving community of people that all play online, but they don't play because it's not a game, it's a flight simulator. And so there are people that they get off of work, they go home, and they log onto their computer, and they have custom setups that makes their computer look like an actual flight controls of a 747. And they will fly the 4 p.m. Chicago to New York commuter flight. Yes.
I thought that's where you were going with this. Tell me this is not true.
This is a real thing. This is a whole community of people that do this, and there's hundreds of simulated flights with no passengers every day.
These are not AI versions. These are humans flying scheduled air traffic routes.
It gets better, because there are also other people that don't play the game. They log into a voice chat, and they are ATC for virtual airports. They don't even fly the planes. They're not even logged into the game.
I thought you were about to say that there were people who are passengers who go sit on these virtual planes and don't do anything, get bad service.
No, I thought
don't have enough leg room.
Just air traffic controllers for the people that are flying the virtual commuter flights.
That sounds like that could be a really good substitute for actually training air traffic controllers.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool that people are that into it, and it just goes to show you, pick a thing, and there is a rabbit hole of people that love it so much that you can't understand it. But this is one thing.
That feels to me like the same spiritual domain as Civil War reenactment.
Yes. Yeah, that's the kind of level of dedication and slight bit of craziness that you have to be into stuff like that. But I
blew my mind with that.
Well, I explained all that to say, I'll put dollars to donuts. I'm not sure if that's what happened here, but there are people that are crazy enough about public safety and bureaucracy to make a website for a fake organization and start putting out information as if they were a government regulatory body that no one has ever heard of.
Yeah, there's also a subreddit that says Wyoming isn't real, and it's a bunch of people trying to prove that the state of Wyoming doesn't exist.
Is that real? Is that really a subreddit about Wyoming not being real?
Yes.
Oh.
In fact, I have one of the most upvoted posts of all time there.
Oh, what? I have to know. What did you post?
I'll put a link to it. When I drove through Wyoming, I took a bunch of photos of it, of things that weren't real in Wyoming, and it struck the right nerve with that community.
Oh, did people go nuts? Screaming at how you faked all these photos?
What was it? I remember what it was. I was using my phone, and I got a Google Maps pop-up that said something like, you welcome to Wyoming. And I took a screenshot of it and I posted it to the Wyoming Isn't Real subreddit, and they were basically talking about computers being in on the conspiracy, I think.
Why were you driving through Wyoming? This is a follow-up question.
This is from last July. This is documented on the podcast.
You drove through. Why did you drive? Where were you going?
I went to visit my mother.
Where? I don't know where Wyoming is, Ben.
Why it doesn't exist?
Yeah. Why did you have to drive through Wyoming? In my mind,
because it's between Illinois and Utah.
I don't think that's possible. Like these, you're saying like you could say any two cities on the planet, and none of those, if I drew a straight line, I think would go through Wyoming. Like that just can't be real.
You need to join the Wyoming doesn't exist subreddit. You'd fit right in.
I absolutely believe that Wyoming is real. But the last I heard is that they weren't letting people leave the state at all because the population was only
talking
decreasing.
About last July.
Yeah, so I'm surprised that you got through the guards. Like you drove into Wyoming, like no, you live here now.
It's not real.
It's not real. Wyoming's not real. You heard it here first.
It's time for some bad at husbanding.
So, interesting thing about bad at husbanding. My wife offered an alternate version of this segment. And she said, you really should call this good at wifing.
What?
Well, because we call it bad at husbanding, because we're bad at husbanding. But she said the converse of that is good at wifing. Good at being a wife. The act of being a wife.
But why would two men talk about how good at how someone's good at wifing?
Yeah, why would two married men ever talk in a public forum about how much they appreciate their loving wives? Good God, Ben. Wake up.
Well, when you say it like that.
Alicia, I'm so sorry for this man. Okay, no. So this happened the other day, and when this transpired, and then afterward we recognized what had happened and broke it down, and we both just collapsed laughing because it was so dumb.
Okay, what was it?
So I have a well-documented setup for my work-from-home computer, right? And so it's in the kitchen. It's on a counter that I built special for it, and I love my workstation. I had another one of those moments this week. Like, I just stopped what I was doing. I was like, I really love everything about my setup right now. And then I went back to work. But my wife also does her homework. She's getting her doctorate, and she was sitting next to me in the afternoon doing her homework, and I was doing my accounting. And then she decided she needed a snack. And then so she went and got a very practical snack, and she made some popcorn and sat back down and was eating popcorn. And then in a silent room, like, I don't know if you've ever sat next to somebody.
Oh, okay, you were working?
Yeah, we were both working.
Okay, so there's someone just sitting there, munch.
Yeah, and it wasn't like ridiculously loud, but it was just very quiet in the room. We didn't have any music on or anything. We were both just doing our thing, and it was just the just that, right?
Okay,
and so
which probably was just outside of your sphere at first, and then it started to intrude, and then you noticed it, and then it started to be more and more obtrusive.
Could not describe it better myself. So, but of course, as a bad husband, I had to do like the thing that you do when your spouse is like,
okay, let me try it. Let me see if I can get what you said. Hey, do you think you could eat that popcorn any louder?
He nailed it. That is like almost identical to what I said, like in a very lighthearted, like jovial, sarcastic way. Could you chew that any louder? Very, very Friends, yeah. And then, of course, she did the thing that you do, which is then take a whole big handful and chew as loud as possible while looking at you. But what's funny is that she then says, last week you were eating chips and you were stupid loud. And I remembered exactly the incident that she was referring to. A week prior, the same situation, only I had taken
was she also pointing out that she didn't say anything?
Oh, no, she said something then.
Okay.
But I was chewing very loudly at that time. And I acknowledge, like, I've been a loud chewer my whole life. I remember being a 12-year-old kid just eating normal food with my mouth shut and my dad yelling at me from across the room, like, could you chew any quieter? And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is just chewing food.
Do I take the next bite?
Yeah. And like, I was trying to chew it real slow, like you do when you're a kid. Like, ow. Yeah. Like, I don't know if that's going to help. Anyway, she brought that up. And I was chewing very loudly at that time. And we had a little back and forth the week before. And I go, oh, you're right. I was chewing pretty loud. I'm sorry about that. And we went back to work. And then like 5 minutes later, she goes, you just called me out for chewing loud. And then you apologized to me. And like, I had to stop what I was doing because that's exactly what had happened. She was chewing obnoxiously loud with a snack next to me while I was trying to do paid work. And I apologized to her for it.
Awesome.
How did that happen?
Good at wifing.
I'm just whipped. That's what it boils down to.
All right. Well, this is the Bad at Magic podcast, and occasionally we talk about Magic the Gathering, and a new set just came out. So the geniuses over at Wizards of the Coast decided that they wanted to do what's called a top-down set, where they start with the theme and then let that drive what they want to design for the cards. And in this case, the theme was Norse mythology.
You say that every time, like it's like some crazy thing. They do this every set.
No,
like
they're not always top-down.
But they always have a theme and a unifying like universe and story and stuff behind it.
Well, I had this weird feeling when it came out that like this can't have been the first time they've done Norse mythology. Like it feels like that already exists in their universe. But other than like an Ice Age theme set, they haven't really done this. So this is the first time with, Thor and Odin and Loki and all of the mythology that goes along with that stuff. And it's pretty cool.
None of these characters are actually named Thor, Odin, and Loki.
So they do the Wizards of the Coast thing where just to own all the intellectual property, they rename it all in their own names that sound vaguely Norse, but not names you know.
I look at it as they're paying an homage to classic Norse mythology, and you can see the inspiration in the different choices and the story and the plot lines that they made. For example, our Loki in this set is a notorious trickster planeswalker from another set that's just has walked into this Norse-looking place, which is super
that's a cool plot twist.
Yeah, it's excellent, and I appreciate it very much.
There's artifacts that you would expect, swords and hammers and those kinds of things, and mechanics that appropriately go with the theme of this world. And we've done a couple of drafts together, and I done a sealed pool, and it's a good set. Recommended.
Yeah, it's fun.
Thumbs up.
This is the set. I don't know why, but this is what it was. I saw an article where Magic the Gathering, the Arena client, was getting ported to mobile. So they came out with a mobile version of Magic.
But not for iOS.
But not for Apple. Ha ha! Screw you, Apple. We win again. But so I realized that it was going to be tied to my Arena account. And I'm like, I haven't logged in like a year. I should check up on that. And I logged into my Arena account. I was like, ooh, it looks like I was saving up resources for a new set. Oh, look at this. A new set is coming out tomorrow. And then I ended up drafting like for 2 weeks straight in this Kaldheim when it first dropped.
Yeah, you did pretty well.
I was doing pretty good with the drafts. And feeling super stressed out and like I was terrible at it the whole time.
Yeah. Well, because when you have a podcast called Bad at Magic, it works on your mind.
Well, it's funny because I feel like the first handful of drafts I did really, really well. Because the skills translate. Draft is probably my favorite format, and those skills, it just goes from one to the other.
Yeah, so when it's a big, cloudy, unknown environment, it's an equalizer for the guys that get really good at it from practice.
Yes, and so all things being equal, like everybody gets the same set of cards, everybody has the same level of knowledge going in. I feel like I'm above average player.
Yeah.
But then the format started getting solved, and people realized, these are the things that you need to do to be more competitive. In this
so
format.
then once the checklist gets developed, the script kiddies follow the checklist, and then you're not so good with your rootin' tootin' improvisational Old West style strategy.
I still carried my own, and I still did way more drafts than I had any right to, without having to pay any money. But yes, it got more and more competitive and much closer games towards the end.
All right. I want to tell you about something that happened this week. I was listening to a podcast from Stephen Levitt, one of the co-authors of Super Freakonomics, which we reviewed on the show a couple of weeks ago. He has a podcast where he interviews interesting people. And because of his position as a professor at a major university for 20 years and an author of 3 popular books, he gets pretty good guests. I can't remember the name of this guy. I'll put it in the show notes. But he interviewed this guy that is a famous physicist. I think won a prize, Nobel Prize maybe, but he used to be an economist, and he's talking to an economist. And so Stephen Levitt asked him this really interesting question about what the difference between a physics expert and an economics expert is. And it was a really interesting non-correlation. They're basically opposites. Physics experts, let's start with economics experts. On any one particular topic, there's only maybe one true expert in the world. They're the person that's doing all the research and collecting all the data and citing, and everyone cites them for sources. But there's so many problems you could try to solve with economics. It's virtually, it is unlimited. So there's, a lot of experts but only one really true expert in any given thing. Physics, on the other hand, it's all been boiled down to about 6 or 7 major problems, and everyone's working on them, and everyone's an expert.
So I think we can describe that because physics and economics are inherently fundamentally different, because economics deals with people, and people are flipping crazy and can't be predicted to any degree of success. And physics has to do with like the world, the laws of nature, and how the baseline mechanics of matter interact with each other. So that's pretty stable in most situations.
Yeah, we boiled it down to just a few things we still know how they work. So, they come up with things like string theory and gravitational forces and stuff like that, and they're just trying to figure out.
This is one of those subjects. I was really fascinated by physics when I was growing up and in school, because when you're in high school and you learn Newtonian theory, an object in motion wants to stay in motion and all that stuff, and you're doing the math on the board, and it makes sense. You're like, wow, physics makes sense. We've really got this thing solved. And then I got to college level physics and started realizing, wow, we don't know how any of this stuff works. This is all just like shorthand slapdash equations that kind of work most of the time, so it's good enough for school students to learn.
I had that same taxonomy happen, where in high school I had learned enough calculus, and then we learned physics that was like applied calculus. I'm like, whoa, we can take math and apply it to things that are happening in the real world and describe what's happening right now and predict what's going to happen in the future. This is great. Yeah.
I think I am on record on this podcast as there is a moment in college where I decided that calculus was no longer viable.
When you said it on the podcast, though, you talked about it in the way you talk to your children about math.
Yes. I do talk to my kids about math still. And I still will put on there a couple of nights a week. We'll watch YouTube videos while we're having dinner or something. And I'll put on number file videos talking about different interesting math things.
You're such an interesting dad.
Well, I'm trying to
I'm like, hey, watch this guy fall off his bike, and you're like, let's learn about calculus.
We watched one that was really interesting the other day. It was Veratasium, and I could not quote it for the life of me, but it was interesting because he took this seemingly random problem, and then they graphed it in a third dimension, and then rotated it, and then they showed that there was this recurring ratio that was the same no matter how far you zoomed in on this fractal pattern. And I paused the video because it was way over everybody's heads, including mine. But that I latched onto, and I go, you see this number? And I was pointing at my son, this number is somehow baked into the universe in a way that we don't understand. And that is so cool.
Yeah. And the guy from Veratasium takes a lot of pride in trying to describe things like that in a way that, even though he knows it's going to be over your head, he wants you to feel like you're capable of understanding it.
Yeah, you feel smart after watching that video, but then if you turn around and try to explain it to, I don't know, a podcast audience, you sound really stupid.
Yeah. All right, well, that leads me into another question I want to ask you, and that is, so how do you use math now?
Throughout just in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, because when you went back to high school and you talked about what was the expectation of using math in the future, and how has that panned out for you in your real life?
Okay. Well, I think I sent you a stupid meme about something like this a couple of weeks ago, and it was this cool.
If I can find it, I'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, it was a graph, and at the side it was level of math, and on the bottom was time, and so elementary school and high school and then college, and it's ramping up from algebra to trigonometry to calculus to differential equations, and then on the bottom it said and then your job and your career, and the curve immediately plummeted all the way back down, and it said spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And
you think spreadsheets is math gone wrong?
I don't think. Okay, so bite your tongue, sir. I am a huge fan of spreadsheets.
I was asking you if that's what you were saying.
Oh, no.
You sent me this comic.
What they're saying was as a way of, this is the math that you use in your life at those times, because a very small subset of the population actually uses differential equations in their day-to-day career.
Yeah.
Everyone else on the planet just gets by with, I'd say, algebra.
Yeah. There's some fundamental math skills that I think translate into everything that I always try to impart to my students, even when we were doing spreadsheets. When I was teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I was teaching my students how to use spreadsheets. And one of the things I would teach them is you're probably going to make an error at some point. You'll have a recursive function, or you'll have an error in one of your formulas or something like that. And I want you to be doing enough math in your head so that when you get a bad result from your spreadsheet, an alarm goes off in your head. Like, you're not just assuming anything a computer says is right, because you could have made an error. The computer didn't. The computer did what you told it to do.
Because you can make an error. Yeah, because you
made an error. Yeah. And you need to be able to figure it out. But if you're expecting a 3-digit result and you get a 6-digit result, you don't just go, oh, it must be a 6-digit result. You say, something must be wrong here and I need to fix it.
Okay. Well, for me personally, I like spreadsheets, but that's because I do that same kind of math. But I'm a tax accountant, Ben. So that means
you use math all the time.
I use math all the time, but it's not just like...
It's just arithmetic, though. You're not doing calculus or trigonometry
or geometry. Okay. No, I'm not doing trigonometry, but I'm going to back you off of that a little bit because...
All right. Prove me wrong.
Prove me wrong.
I'm calling it arithmetic. I'm standing by my answer.
It's... The math that I have to do is arithmetic, but it is complicated because there are large and complicated transformative processes that you go through in order to make these arithmetic calculations. Because there's layers of not just rules, but legislation. And legislation is notorious for making perfect, clear sense all the time, Ben.
I missed that unit in my math class, legislation.
Well, it's because like explaining to clients all the time. Oh, drives me nuts.
Is that the one we call fuzzy math?
This is not fuzzy math. No, this is implementation of legal precedents on your tax return.
I get it, but it's still just arithmetic. Yeah, okay, there's 700 steps, but it's still just adding and subtracting.
You say that like so calmly. Now, I want you to have a crying woman on the phone and explain to her that, yes, even though she sold her rental house for a loss, she still has to pay $60,000 in taxes on it.
That was a beautiful accountant vignette. I have to wipe away a tear.
I'm really, really good at those conversations because I'm a robot and I have no emotions.
Okay, I got a math vignette that I will share with you, but I'll save it. Yeah.
Why would you say I have a story, but I'm not going to tell you?
Because we're going to talk about it today. Because right after Bad at English, we're going to talk about jobs that we've had in the past. And one of them I had,
Oh boy, spoilers everyone. Ben's going to tell a riveting story about math.
About math.
Man, I'm staying tuned in.
All right. Well, staying with the theme of working, it's time for Bad at English. So when I was in the UK, they used a phrase that I'd never heard before, but it was instantly apparent what it was they meant. They were referring to someone else that didn't want to do something. What do we say? What do we call that in the U.S.? Like if you have a coworker we say they're dodging or they're
worthless,
avoiding work or something.
Lazy sack of crap. I have a lot of words for those kinds of people.
Yeah, exactly. All that. The phrase they used was slopey shouldered.
They're slopey shouldered.
Yeah, like almost like you're trying to put a burden on their shoulder and it slides off.
Well, then you just put it on their head. If it slides off that, then you put it in their face.
Yeah, I couldn't, and this must be a recent one, but it's only in the UK. I haven't heard it ever used in the US. And the Urban Dictionary says when a person delegates anything given to them or slides it straight off their workload onto someone else's out of laziness. So.
I had, this is one of the effects that got me out of the Air Force, is because I had a couple of slopey-shouldered immediate supervisors.
So everything that came down to them got delegated immediately to you.
Which I would be okay with if they weren't actively volunteering for more stuff to delegate to me to make themselves look better.
Yeah, you described that on the podcast. And the thing that was compelling about that was that they also had access to the information needed to execute those tasks that they weren't passing to you.
Yeah.
You were getting the burden without the benefit of the added rank and privilege.
Yeah, it was frustrating.
Yeah. Well, that's great transition into what I want to be our featured topic today. And I've been holding up for this one for a while. And I want to talk about jobs that we've had in our life. I feel like I've had more than average. And I didn't reflect on this a lot until occasionally in the Air Force, I would supervise an airman or even a sergeant, sometimes even a lieutenant, that their job in the military is the only job they've ever had in their entire life. That just blew my mind.
Yeah, but so listeners, if you don't know Ben Rich personally, something about him is that he's actually 400 years old. And he's done everything from hand digging wells to being, I think at one point you were a cooper, is that right? And then he was a wheelwright for the wagons going out to Utah on the original push. Like, he's done everything.
You're giving facetious examples, but you're going to be surprised how...
Ben, I'm good. No, these, like, they're facetious, but they have to be true. I remember I was sitting down having a conversation with you, and there's a thing I do where my fingers will split at the cuticles, and so I fill them with super glue. Because it's better than a Band-Aid. The super glue works great to hold the skin together until it heals. Uh-huh. And then you were and then out of nowhere you're like, oh, is that the cytotosis?
Cyanoacrylate adhesive.
Yeah, you see. And then I looked at Ben slack-jawed, and then he explained how somehow
he used to work at an adhesives company.
He used to work at an adhesives company and described the exact ingredients on the bottle of glue that I was using to glue my fingers together out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right. I see why that would reinforce this notion that I've done everything. I'm probably not going to do anything to harm that notion of me, but obviously you can't. I do have, I think, the spirit of Mike Rowe in that I have a very healthy respect for work, and I find it fascinating, and I appreciate all jobs. And so, I like trying new things. I don't want to do every job forever, but if I had a friend that was like, I'm a garbage man, you want to ride along in the truck for a day? I'd be like, heck yeah.
Oh, that sounds
if
terrible.
You remember about a year ago, they came and took a colony of bees out of my house. Man, I suited up in that freaking bee suit and got the bees out of my house. That was awesome.
Yeah, there are times in life when more practical people would step in like, no, sir, you are the expert. Please, by all means, take care of the thing that you do all day, every day.
I did that when the obstetrician wanted me to cut the umbilical cord until it was my turn and there were no doctors around. Have I told that story on this podcast?
You have told that story on this podcast. Yes.
Okay.
Ben was also an honorary midwife at one point.
Yeah.
Add that to the list because, all right, this is the thing. I have to tell my half of the story now.
Yep.
So this morning I get a text message from Ben. It says, hey, I put a couple of things in the show notes. Take a look and fill in the blanks when you get a chance. Listeners,
you're working today because it's tax season.
I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit. And normally we have, like a page of notes maybe? Ben listed the jobs that he's had and the lessons and that he's learned from them, and it just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls. Like, it is... And I texted him back, like, I'm working today, right? Like, I can't fill out even, like, a quarter of this. So anyway, I decided to do it live. Ben has comprehensive notes. As always, the Bad at Magic way. Ben has comprehensive notes and clear thoughts that he wants to get out, and I'm just going to wing it.
All right. So I want to divide this into phases of our life, and that will give us a chance to kind of switch back and forth.
Okay.
So the first phase of our life I want to look at is like from, I don't know, however old you were when you got your first real job where you were getting paid to do something until you're about graduated from high school.
Okay. Adolescence.
Yeah, adolescence. So my first job as an adolescent was as a babysitter. Like, I was the oldest of 6 kids. I guess I was mature for my age. People kind of trusted me. And by the time I was 11, people were paying me to watch their kids for a short to a long period of time.
11 is young for a babysitter.
It wasn't then, or at least not in southeastern Idaho or wherever we were. I don't know, Oklahoma.
I mean, I guess the worst thing that's going to happen in southeastern Idaho is bandits are going to come burn the barn down.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. One time, my younger sister had a febrile seizure while I was babysitting when I was like 11 years old. And we ended up in the emergency room. And yeah, that really put the fear into me. And probably my parents, too, for leaving me. But
wow. So you like hitched the horse to the wagon and got her down to the barber all on your own, huh?
Yeah. And then, yeah, that was scary. I remember, she fell off the couch and she was shaking and her eyes rolled back in her head. And I'm thinking, this feels like a grown-up problem. I called the neighbor.
That is the appropriate response. Like, this is over my pay grade.
Yeah. So I babysat for my mom, but going on probably until I was about 15 years old, I think people paid me to babysit their kids. So that was my first real job. Also about that time, I started, doing kid-style landscaping. I'm not talking like, digging trenches or setting up retaining walls. Just, hey, here's $20, mow the lawn kind of thing.
Okay. That's a good price for mowing a lawn.
It was not that much back then. I'm sorry. I was thinking about today.
Oh, okay.
But also about that same time when I was 11 years old, I don't know what got into it. I've never actually asked my mom the decision making behind it, but she decided that she wanted to toughen me up in the way that she was as a kid, and she sent me for the entire summer between the end of school getting out and school starting back up to go work on her father's cattle ranch in Idaho.
Solid. How old were you then?
12.
12? What does a 12-year-old do on a cattle ranch?
Holy crap. What does a 12-year-old not do on a cattle ranch?
Oh, I guess there's a lot of crap.
I drove dump trucks. I herded cattle. I moved sprinkler pipe. I fixed things. Yeah, 12-year-olds do everything. And if you don't, you can learn and they will teach you.
This is just confirming that you're 400 years old, because this is something like a kid would be expected to do in like the 1700s.
I'll never forget when my Vietnam veteran Purple Heart uncle took me out and says, hey, it's time to neuter the new sheep. I'm like, what? What's that mean? He's like, come with me. I'll show you.
You learned so much that summer.
There's probably more humane ways to do this, but he grabbed one of the little sheep, he turned it upside down, he sat on its head, he grabbed the scrotum, hacked off the end of it with a knife, pulled out the testicles with his teeth, and spat them on me. And he was the kind of guy that was trying to hit me. And I was like, and then he poured some iodine on it, and the poor little sheep walked away with his legs all skewed, kind of going, meh. And that's what
I'm frozen. Like, this is stuff people go to therapy for, Ben.
Yeah, well, that's in Idaho they call that Tuesday.
I'm pretty sure spitting testicles at somebody is a jailable offense now.
Not in Idaho, especially if you're a cattle rancher. So another example was we had a herd of sheep, and there was one of the sheep that was starting to act kind of sick. And apparently what happens, like especially when they're mating, when they get up on top of the other one, they could injure the back of the other sheep with the hooves. And if they get an injury and it doesn't heal well, then flies will get into it, and then it'll get infected with maggots.
Okay.
So he's like, we got a sheep that's got maggots. We got to take care of it. I'm like, well, what do we do? He says, well, you got to catch it. So they were in the pen. They're in the pen, and it turned into like sheep roundup. So I'm like running around trying to catch this one. It's pretty obvious which one it is. And I finally get it and wrestle it to the ground, and then we grab it and hold it down. And he scrapes off like necrotic flesh, and then he sprays this really caustic, like I think it might have just been spray paint. I don't know, whatever it is, some kind of spray that kills the flies, and then we let it go.
This sounds like just terrible. Like, this is awful.
Yeah, but most of the time, here's what my work was. Every day in Idaho, the ground is really fertile because it's like this cradle of civilization, volcanic playground that used to be really active and now it's kind of calmed down. So the soil is really great, but it's a very arid climate. So in order for anything to grow, you constantly got to water. And in well-developed modern farms, they have very labor-free irrigation systems. If you've ever been out west, you've seen them. You can also see, if you look from satellite photos, giant circles everywhere on the ground where they have some big A-frame sprinklers that just go in a circle and keep everything wet. Well, in either hilly or rocky terrain, it's impractical or implausible to install one of those, or poor farmers that haven't gotten to modernizing all their farm yet. And so they have big sections of their property that are capable of growing crops but require very manual intervention for providing irrigation. So at the time, they used what were called hand lines, and basically what they are is a 40-foot section of pipe with a riser in the center that has a sprinkler on it, the kind that flaps when it goes around.
Okay.
And the pipe is about 4 inches around, about the size of like a big gulp. And at one end is a spring-based contraption at the male, and at the other end is a female. And so what you do is you turn off the pressure to the sprinkler line, you walk out to the middle where the riser is, you disconnect it from the previous section, pick it up as high as you can to get over the growing crops, and carry it 30 feet along so that you get out of the range of the sprinkler head, put it back down and connect it to the next line. And a single line of these pipes might be 20 sections long.
Okay. And
so you move each one of these 40-foot sections of pipe 20 long, 2 or 3 times a day to get this whole field irrigated.
That sounds
And
terrible.
I remember the first time I went out there, and this is the reason my mom sent me, I think, to, like that scene from Mulan, Mr. I'll make a man out of you. I couldn't do it. Well, luckily it was early in the season. The crops weren't tall yet, and it felt like the crops growed at the same rate that my muscles did. So they were always just pushing me. Because when you first, I could barely unhook it, and I picked it up, and I couldn't get it even up to my waist. And I started walking, and I'm teetering back and forth, and I get to the end, and I can't get it to go into the line at the other end. I have to set it down and walk over, and it took me 3 hours to move, 2 sections. My uncle came over and finished the other 2. So, but over the course of that summer, I got stronger muscles and I got better skills, and I could go out to the field and I could move, 100 sections of pipe in an hour.
These formative experiences that you're talking about are just they're ridiculous by any modern standard. You realize that, right?
Yeah, but by any not modern standard, it's kind of mundane.
Oh, yeah, that's what I said earlier. For us, this is a normal day for a 12-year-old in the 1700s. Ben, we have self-driving cars now. This kind of stuff shouldn't happen anymore.
And before they sold my grandfather's ranch, because he died, my uncle retired, a few years ago. They'd already installed rotary lines, and no boy will ever be out there moving hand lines ever again.
And you, of course, had to go there with your kids and stand with one foot up on the fence and go, "Oh, you see these new fancy A-frame sprinklers? Let me tell you about the real sprinklers that were here."
Yeah, but before that summer, I was pale and scrawny, and after that summer, I was kind of, wiry and strong and sun-baked, and yeah, it was good. Good work. Work made a man out of me that summer.
I was tan, a little less scrawny, and way more traumatized.
It wasn't traumatic.
Oh,
all right, what were some adolescent jobs you had?
I'm traumatized listening to these stories.
What were you doing when you were an adolescent?
I was playing video games in the house. If we're talking about adolescent jobs, okay. So, yeah, babysitting. I'm the oldest of 3, not 6, so, my multitasking skills weren't there, but I could entertain 2 younger children. And I don't think I was 12, but I was probably 13 or 14 when I was getting paying babysitting gigs to just watch little kids, make sure they go to bed, and they get to watch cable TV.
Before the grumps come back, but the little kids are in bed.
I remember I was 14 watching South Park, the first season of South Park, when it was still new and everyone was talking about it, and that was
edgy.
It was very edgy, and boy, I thought that was hilarious, and I learned some things. No, after that, I did get a job at the time. My dad was a partner in a pool store. He was still he's been a pool guy since I was 6. I remember the night when he. He quit his job at the ice plant to start his own pool business. And I remember my mom was in the front room, brought us out
Oh,
Dad's coming home, and this was his last day at work, and we had a little celebration, whatever. And he started his career as a pool guy. And then many, many years into it, he formed a partnership with another guy, and they opened a pool store. I'll never forget the place. It's still there, I think, 67th and Bell. Pool Parts Plus. If you live in Glendale, Arizona, go to Pool Parts Plus and talk to Mark. Anyway, so I, as a high school kid, I got a job in the summer working at the pool store. And I did all the things, they did all the things wrong. I was paid cash under the table.
So it was retail, but it wasn't chain retail. It was mom and pop store kind of retail.
Yes.
Is that better or worse?
I don't know, because I didn't work any other retail jobs, because that one was enough of an experience for me.
Did they make you work excessively long shifts or ask you to do unethical things or...
No, this was my.
You weren't breathing chlorine all day that was hazardous to your health and no one cared.
Oh no, I was doing that, and we still did that. They had an unventilated storage unit in the back where they kept all.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Well, I always held my breath in there, and then the guy would always. I remember the partner, the owner of the place who ran the store. My dad did. You
had your safety squint on.
I had no safety, nothing. And he was mad at me because I would take so long getting 40 gallons of chlorine out of this thing. So here's the thing. If you mix liquid chlorine and liquid acid, which we stored in the same unventilated container, if you mix the two, you get mustard gas, and it will kill you. And so I, being a person that understood chemistry...
Don't cross the streams, Egon.
Yeah, I was in high school chemistry at the time, and I realized I shouldn't be breathing any of these terribly caustic things. And so I would take a deep breath, hold my breath, run into this unventilated container, and I would grab like 8 or 12 gallons of the chemicals and haul them out and set them down and then breathe heavy for a second because I just lifted, whatever, 40 or 50 pounds and hauled it out there. And the guy was always mad at me for taking so long. He's like, you're taking so long getting this stuff in here. Okay, one, you asked me to move 300 gallons of liquid. I want to see you do it faster. And two, have you been in there in the last week? Because you will go in, if you went in there and took a deep breath, you passed out because there's no oxygen left.
Okay, but you're answering the question I asked you earlier. You said you didn't know the answer to. Do you think people talk to their employees like that when it's not a mom and pop business?
You think people? Yes, I think they do. Because
if this was Walmart pool supply, do you think, one, they're going to store it in a non-approved container, and two, they're going to yell at their employees for taking so long for doing a difficult, heavy task?
You're talking about the Walmart that has been sued multiple times for forcing their employees to work unpaid overtime?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I think both of those things I just said are true. I think they'd have a realistic expectation for how long it takes to accomplish a task, and they wouldn't store in a non-safety compliant container.
Okay, so maybe this person had some unrealistic expectations of what I could do. But anyway, by the end of the summer, I was opening and closing the store on some days that he didn't want to come in. I was capable of running the register, opening and closing the register, putting in the orders for the new products for the next week or whatever. I remember there was one day we were particularly slow. I was in the store by myself all day, opened and closed the store, and we had one customer the entire day. And I was just dying of boredom. And so I mopped all the floors. And when that didn't kill the whole day, I took everything off of the shelves, dusted it, and put it all back. And when that didn't kill the day, I went through and reorganized the entire tool stock room. And when that didn't kill the rest of the day, I finally went to the break room and I sat down and I was playing with a beach ball for 15 minutes. And that's...
Okay. You feel like you just described to me the scene from Spider-Man Homecoming where he gets locked in the warehouse and he does things for it looks like forever, and then he asks the suit how long it's been. She's like 17 minutes.
That's kind of what happened. But I did legitimately... I was racking my brain for stuff to do because I learned working that retail job that productivity makes the time go by. So just stay busy and do stuff, and then your day goes by faster. So
man, my job right now is very much like that.
I was trying to find things to do, and I ran out of things to do. And so then I went in the break room and I played with a beach ball for 15 minutes. And then a customer came in and I went out to the front and I helped them. What's funny about this is I heard after the fact that apparently the guy, my dad's partner, was logging into the store security cameras to kind of check on me throughout the day. And he had recorded me sitting in the break room for 10 minutes. And then showed the clip.
And that was the only thing he talked about?
And he showed the clip to my dad and was like, look at your son doing this. And then my dad asked me, what else did you do that day? And then I listed off. I mopped the store. I dusted every bottle on the shelves. I reorganized. I listed off all the things I just talked about. And my dad looked back at him and just said, shut up, he's fine.
Yeah. That is such a small-minded sole proprietor kind of thing. You were sitting around for 10 minutes. Yeah. All right. So you babysat, you did some retail. Anything else during the adolescent period?
Not for money, no. I did chores around the house, but that doesn't count.
All right, I'm going to do the second half from the adolescent period.
Second
half? So when I was 14, I wanted my first job where I got a paycheck with a corporate logo on it. And at the time, I absolutely loved Taco Bell, so that was where I went. I went and sat down, had an interview, and it felt very serious and grown up to me. But I bet they would have hired a ham sandwich. It's just whatever, man. Sign here.
You know what's funny is when I was in high school and I'd go to my favorite restaurant, Whataburger. Even I was 15, Ben, and I'd be getting my order and thinking in my head, it's man, I'm so glad I don't have to work here.
Did they call it Whataburger in Arizona? Because they call it Whataburger in Texas.
I call it Whataburger. So
all right.
I mean, that's listeners pipe in. What is it? Whataburger or Whataburger? Please type out your responses and let us know which one we should pronounce.
Okay, so I started working at Taco Bell and I was kind of digging it. There's so much to learn at first when you're brand new to fast food, and it was very corporate. They had a training video that you watch, and we hadn't really gotten around to all the diversity and sexual harassment stuff. So it's mostly just about the job. Here's how to make a taco, and here's how to shut the store at night, and here's how to clean up. And all of it was about maintaining the safety standards and proper food handling procedures. So sometimes people talk about working fast food, like you were saying you felt sorry for the guys that had to work at Whataburger. I didn't. I wanted to be one of the guys that work at Taco Bell. I want to go back there and make a taco. So
what
I found out...
You're such a weird person.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you're such a weird person wanting to make a taco at Taco Bell. It's like, oh, hey, are they still using the number 4 bins back there? Man, I'll tell you, when I was back working Taco Bell. Seriously, Ben, shut up and get your taco.
Dang it, I totally do that. So one thing I found out, sometimes they say, oh, once you work fast food, then you won't want to eat there anymore. No, it was not like that at all. Like, really good, standardized safety in food handling, no cross-contamination, maintain everything at a certain temperature when it's on the line, clean everything up and sanitize it at the end of the day, wash the dishes. I mean, everything.
Have you seen the movie Waiting?
This wasn't a movie, Josh. This was real life.
I know, but like, watch the movie Waiting, and I don't care if you have worked fast food. Like you're not gonna like look at food the same ever again.
I get it, but it would take a lot of... Okay, you did something last episode that I really like. When I told you I was having problems with an app for a fast food restaurant and didn't tell you what fast food restaurant what it was, you made an assumption that you clarified later, and that if it was this particular fast food restaurant, you would be more surprised because they have a reputation for being good in their homogeneity in execution.
Yeah. We're talking about McDonald's, and if they want to sponsor us, please, this would be the time.
Yeah, because they very much have a very consistent corporate culture where you can kind of expect that people are going to carry out the procedures everywhere you go. It was like that at Taco Bell.
Okay.
Anyway, I liked that job so much that when my family moved, I got a job at another Taco Bell, and I stayed there for quite a while, till I was about a senior in high school. And I learned all the things and got really good at it, to the point where I was really comfortable. Like, hey, we've had 3 people call in sick. It's just Ben. Can he work the front, the drive-through, and the line? Oh, yeah, he's got it.
I love the amount of pride dripping out of your voice when you say that. It's like, Josh, I could handle the drive-through, the front, and the line all at the same time because that's how good of a short-term memory and simple processing skills I have.
Yes, I was very good at a really easy job that has low barrier to entry. I'm very proud of that.
I'm imagining you walking into the second Taco Bell after you moved with like your old Taco Bell visor on and like your Employee of the Month sticker on the shirt, like feet up on the thing. Like, listen, just let me explain to you right now. You want me in your Taco Bell. I've gotten offers from number 23 down the street, but I heard that 26 is where you got to be.
Okay, you forget that we've talked about this before. That was the Taco Bell where I had the manager that made me go buy him cigarettes. He didn't care. He didn't care that I was Employee of the Month because he was going to go out after his shift and put the coffee pot on the metal detector to make sure his stats were good. That's
I was just going to bring that up. The guy that was manipulating the corporate stats with the coffee pot. Yes, I remember this guy. Yes, he is an idol of mine to this day.
I also worked as a janitor at my high school. If I had to pick any job I've ever had, I hated that one the most. And the reason I'd say I hated that one the most is because they hired their high school students to come clean up, and they gave you 2 hours to work. And then they would assign you a fixed amount of work. And if you finished it in less than 2 hours, they would tell you to go slower next time.
That's called every union job.
I hated it. I hated it so much. I was just all alone in a classroom, clapping erasers and picking up spitballs and whatever, and I would just finish it, and there would be nothing left to do.
What school?
I wasn't waiting on a customer to show up like you were in a retail store. I was just...
You had a finite amount of work, but also the finite amount of time in which to do it.
I would have been happy to clock out a half hour early.
What school were you in that, what school districts hire students for labor? That doesn't happen anymore either.
This is in rural northern Illinois. I was one of 88 students in my class.
Were you paid cash? Did they tell you not to tell your parents? Was this taking place of an elective?
School district's logo on them.
Were you getting a PE credit for this or something? This sounds so shady.
So after working in fast food and janitor, I figured it was time to take a step up in the world, and I applied to a retail job at Sears.
Oh, yes. The infamous job in which you first saw the Nike Air Max 95s.
That's the one. So, yeah, and then I had to wear a suit and tie to work. And it's not like I was getting paid more. I just had to look like I was.
But luckily, you can buy a suit at Sears.
This job had the aspect to it that I there was a loose commissioning system where I was in electronics retail, and if I sold a customer product, I would get a portion of it. And so I got like a minimum wage to assure that I made the minimum wage, and then I could make more than that by making more sales. And there was a high commission on add-on things like warranties and accessory packages and stuff like that that had a tremendous amount of markup on them. Yeah, and that was one thing I was glad not to have to do at fast food that I really didn't like about retail. Like, hey, there's an opportunity for you through high pressure sales tactics to make the company more money, and we're going to pressure you to do these things.
Yeah, yeah. I had a job like that, and I was terrible at it. We talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. Please continue about Sears.
All right. That's about all I want to say about Sears. And I'm kind of getting to the end of my adolescent period. That's about the time I was graduating from high school.
So then I turned 14, and man, that was a lot of jobs that year. Jeez, Ben. You had more jobs before you graduated high school than I've had my whole life, I think.
Well, I'm sure you got a few more you can add to the list. So let's transition to the next period. So then it's like still in the teenage years, but before I started college. So I
there was this gap between high school and college where I had 6 more jobs.
Yeah, actually. I knew my whole life I was going to be a full-time missionary. So, and I count that as a job. It's not paid. You pay to do it, but it's every bit a job. There's a very rigid culture that exists on top of it. We talked about this in a past episode. You interviewed me on it. But, it's very much a job, and it goes along with all of the things that go along with a job. The good things, the bad things, the culture, the skills that you learn, all those kinds of things. And I reflect on it almost every day. It really shaped my life.
If there is one thing that I can really respect about the LDS lifestyle that you live, is that they have indoctrinated and just built into their culture this expectation that you will put in a tremendous amount of effort for no physical reward whatsoever. Like, it's all, they build it up as like, this is spiritual reward. Like, this is enriching for you. Now pay us all this money so you can go do something that you don't want to do in a place that you probably don't want to be.
Yeah, that's true. I won't even argue with the way that you said it, other than I was doing my tax return today, and the fact that I'm paying for my 2 sons to be out on their mission turned the amount of money I would have paid for their room and board into a charitable contribution.
Okay. Then that's all we have to say about that.
So I got back off my mission, and I went back to retail. I was Employee of the Month at Best Buy, and I also got a job at Home Depot doing merchandising.
Wait.
Those jobs were fine, but they were just the step to save up some money before I left for college.
So you worked at Best Buy just selling random consumer electronic nonsense to people that don't know anything.
Yeah. Okay, I want to tell you a fun story about Best Buy. I wanted to be in the computer department, and I guess they needed people there, so they sent me there. And you kind of have a zone that you're assigned to, and my zone included the printer aisle. And so I mastered the printer aisle. Like I'd learned how to do the demo on every printer. I learned all of their quirks and stuff like that. And then about 3 years later, I got a job at Microsoft doing tech support, and I realized in this uncanny way that I had developed a skill to be able to recognize a printer by the sound that it makes, the manufacturer and model number. And so when I later became a tech support technician for Microsoft Word, frequently people were calling me with technical support questions relating to their printer. And I would be able to recognize their printer over the phone by hearing the sound of it. And I remember one time a lady was like, "Can you see me?"
Oh, that's that Canon 3000 MK. I'll bet it jams on you every third page, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
I have a tangential story, if you don't mind me interjecting.
Yeah, go ahead.
So first of all, that's fantastic. And that's the kind of thing that gets you ridiculous street cred when you're in the nerd industry. Like,
and babes. I was just rolling in it, man.
Oh, yeah, just all of the Microsoft support babes. Yeah, I can see that. I remember one time for some reason, my mom was going antique shopping, and I was along for the ride, like you are when you're a teenager, right?
Yeah. I could see you just sitting haplessly in the back seat with the look of chagrin on your face.
Little did I realize that was a very important skill. like going shopping with a woman for things that you have absolutely no interest in, but being able to follow them around and be semi-actively engaged while still like replaying your favorite like sports clips in your mind. This is an important skill to develop.
Yeah.
But I do remember that we were walking through this antique store, which I have absolutely no desire to like even look at anything in this place. And then I heard the telltale sound that is only ever made by a dot matrix printer. That back and forth, like that grinding noise.
Yeah.
And I remember like following it around the store until I found the office that the store had like buried in a corner somewhere. And I like peeked my head in, and there's a guy on an old CRT monitor with his dot matrix printer going. And like I poked my head in, and he looks at me, and I go, "Shouldn't that be out here with the rest of the antiques?" You
were searching through the jungles of Africa, so you could say Dr. Livingston, I presume.
That guy got super mad at me.
What?
Oh yeah! Oh man!
You should have laughed.
He did the ha ha and then scowled at me really hard until I went away.
Good one. I'm glad you followed through on that. Well done.
All right, sorry. You were talking about Best Buy printers and then Home Depot. How do you go from Best Buy to Home Depot? I feel like Home Depot is all right. No offense for people that work at Home Depot, don't at me, but I feel like if you're working in the computer aisle at Best Buy, going to Home Depot is a radical lifestyle change.
Yeah, so I didn't work for Home Depot proper. It's kind of a long story. I'm trying to think if there's an interesting part to it. I guess the interesting part is a lesson in networking. And that is my sister was friends with the people that owned a greenhouse that supplied plants to all the Home Depots in the area. And they found that when they had people go to the stores and water the plants and take the ones that look sad and take them out and take the ones that look good and put them in the front and face them all the front, that increase their sales more than enough to justify sending a person to the stores to look after their things.
So wait, this is like a consignment from the nursery to Home Depot?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
And Home Depot was so pleased with the impact it's had, and apparently, I don't know why they didn't want to hire their own employees to do this. They were paying this company to hire people to do this. So I wasn't doing retail. I wasn't answering questions. I just went to the garden department and made the plants look nice.
This doesn't surprise me at all that Home Depot didn't want to hire their staff to do this because, again, people don't at me. But I feel like minimum wage employees, like I wouldn't trust a minimum wage employee to turn a plant like to face the sun. Like, I need you to go turn the plants to face the sun. I can imagine the blank stares that I would get.
Yeah, and it was great. I think I got paid $13 an hour to do that job. I love that job.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And ridiculous.
So, but, I was kind of having my fill with and those were just fill-in hours. They were at different times in my life, but they're about that same time. I also realized that I had self-taught myself to type about 60 words a minute, and I kind of had an intuitive understanding for like spreadsheets and word processors and stuff like that, which just was a bit uncommon at the time. Now it's quite common, but it was a bit uncommon at the time. So I went down to a temp agency, and they gave like an aptitude test, and I scored off the charts. So they started giving me also, like $14, $15 an hour jobs to go fill in for 2 weeks at X company to, do secretarial work while they were trying to hire a new person or something like that. So during that time, I went everywhere. I worked for a Visa and MasterCard credit card company. I worked at the adhesives company. I worked at Snap-on Tools. And I got to just go to those places, see what it was like for a little while, do a bunch of stupid paperwork, and then leave. And it was really cool.
That's cool. I have another tangential story because you have all these jobs, and I just have to put in my little anecdotes. So I remember when I was in high school, they offered out the opportunity for seniors to go take the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. So this is the test that they give like raw recruits when they're in basic training to figure out what skills or knowledge that they have and what jobs they would be good at.
I want you to say something more jaded about it.
Okay. This is the test where it determines like your fate as a military guy. If you don't score well on this test, then you're going to end up as a maintainer or as a security forces, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, but they kind of lead you to believe that like you could not score good enough to be worthy of the military, and I don't think that's true.
Well, it was floated to us as this is like the military is giving it out, but it could give you an idea of where your skills lie. Like it's just it's kind of it was pitched to us as like a general knowledge kind of test that would give you an idea of what you're good at and where you should go with your career.
When it was pitched to me, it was more like, this is to see if you're good enough for the military. But what they're not telling you is, we don't care what your score is, we'll give you a job.
Yeah, that's the bottom line of that one.
Yeah.
So what was interesting about this is I took it because as a high school senior, staring down that loaded gun that is graduation, and all of a sudden you have to figure out what you're going to do with your whole life. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I had no idea. Like, I at the time I thought like, I could do computer stuff, and that was the extent of my understanding.
That's how well you thought that through.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, this is perfect. I'm going to take a comprehensive government design test that's going to tell me what I'm good at. Perfect. Right up my alley. It did not help at all. That test told me that I qualified for every job in the Air Force except mechanic. Like, I scored like good enough to get any job, any AFSC as an enlisted person. And then it was great. I loved the graph, the bar chart, because it showed the bars all across the top. And then it went to mechanic, like actual automotive mechanic, and it dropped into 20-something%.
Why?
Because I know nothing about cars. I know nothing about cars, Ben.
But was it a test to see how much pre-existing knowledge? Isn't it? It's an aptitude battery, not a...
It asked me specifically, like, what does a differential do? Like, that is the only question that I remember off of that test. And I remember because I stared at it for 5 minutes, like, I don't even know what a differential is.
Okay. All right. Do you know now?
Now I do, yes. It's that part that transfers linear circular motion from one direction, splits it into the two rear tires, or if it's four-wheel drive, then the front tires too.
That was excellent.
Well, I watched a YouTube video about it not too long ago. Another tangent. This is one of our dinner time YouTube videos. Apparently, back in the 1930s and 40s, Chevy put out a ton of really awesome engineering videos where they were trying to show off, look at this amazing engineering that we put into our vehicles. And
they do a great one on a differential.
And they have absolutely no respect for the intelligence of the common human being at that time. And so, man, it feels like it was made for kindergartners, and it just works its way up super slow to make you understand that this goes in a circle, and that makes your tires go.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad you have the aptitude for everything but being a mechanic.
Yeah, I still can't change my own oil. I mean, I could, but I'm not doing
that. All right. So it's about this time I met my wife. We got married, and I got accepted to college. And I wasn't on scholarship, so I kind of needed to hold down a job while I was going to school full time. So I went and applied at a company called Convergys, which it takes contracts to do technical support. So I got a contract. I was on the Microsoft Word contract. So I did personal support for people who were looking for technical support for using a word processor, which is right up my alley. I mean, right out of the box, I was immediately identified as somebody that was good at this, and they promoted me to tier 2, and then I got promoted to trainer, and I did this, worked my way through college as a tech support for Microsoft.
You are exactly the kind of person that these kind of places want, because you're super friendly. You genuinely care about every single person that calls in. Mary, you listen to me. We are going to get this page break in the right spot. Now you stay with me and we're going to make it happen. Like, you're just that level of nice. And then
you're telling yourself the wrong story about this. Like, if you've ever watched one of those like funny channels on YouTube where they tell horror stories about tech support, man, I had that stuff. I had some cool stories. I had some terrible stories. Sometimes somebody will call you up because they've like password protected their document and they forgot the password and they want you to unlock it for them. Man, if we had some secret backdoor to your password, how would you feel, to your document? How would you feel about that? Like, there's no backdoor. There's no break-in. It's encrypted. We can't get into it. And sometimes we would have a miraculous solution and be able to help somebody that had lost, a year's worth of work, and sometimes it was just giving them terrible news. Sometimes it was horrible, frustrating phone calls with people where they just couldn't follow simple instructions. Like, you'd spend 20 minutes getting them to click on the right thing. I'm glad tech support has really taken a turn now where you can just take control of the other person's computer and not have to worry about that. I bet that saves everyone a lot of time.
As a computer guy, I hate calling tech support because I know what's going to happen, Ben. They're going to make me go through all of the troubleshooting steps that I just did. And I even preface, like, I've restarted the router. I unplugged it. I plugged it back in. I reset my cookies. I've done all this. Please, can we skip it? And they say, well, you need to go unplug your router. I try so hard not to call
right.
them.
Right, because these are low-wage employees that are just following a checklist, and they try to turn it into that.
Yep.
But there is room for innovation. Like we had a good ticketing system, and I remember they would, if you could determine that a problem was repeatable and that you had determined a novel solution for it, then you would write an article that would get published in their knowledge base that was then accessible to the public and to the other tech support technicians, so that your name would go on it, at least internally, and you felt some ownership and some pride. And that's why I think like that. That's why I had that interaction last week with the guy from with Wendy's. I imagine behind all this are these people trying to not just improve the product, but improve the process behind it.
That's only you. You are the only person that's trying to make the world a better place. Everyone else is just trying to live here, man.
So I read a book a few months ago called On the Clock, What Low-Wage Work Did to Me and How It Drives America Insane by Emily Gunnelsberger. And what she did is she was between jobs, and I can't remember if it was related to COVID. It was probably the year before. She was between jobs, and she was a journalist, and she decided she wanted to do a bit of stunt journalism where you go out and do something crazy and then write about it.
Okay.
So she decided she was going to pick 3 of the most notorious minimum wage jobs and go work them and then write. And I think she'd already made up her mind in advance that these were going to be soul-sucking, miserable experiences.
So tech support, Best Buy, and Taco Bell.
Yes. She did 3 jobs that I've done. Well, no, 2 of the 3 jobs were jobs I have had. She worked at Convergys doing telemarketing, which I did. She worked at fast food. In her case, it was in McDonald's, but she did it in San Francisco, which was weird in and of itself. And then she worked the holiday season at Amazon Distribution Center.
Ooh, Amazon Distribution. Whoa.
Yeah, that one sounded like it was kind of rough.
Scary, like physically scary.
So when my son got back from his mission, that was where he got a job, and he was getting paid, I don't know, $14 an hour to go do that. And he would just come home exhausted every day. And the thing about that is that Amazon technology has gotten so good that they've found a way to squeeze every last drop of productivity out of people. Like imagine when you're working at the pool store, when you'd gone in the break room for 10 minutes, if you had a beeping device on your wrist that told you to get back to work.
I'd have smashed it.
Yeah, well... Yeah, that's the thing about working at a pool store. How would have been your last day at the Amazon distribution center?
Oh man, that just dives into this conversation about how people can't have it both ways because they want to have everybody wants to have a living wage, but nobody wants to do any work.
But here's the thing: between her 2 months at McDonald's and her 2 months at Convergys, she talked so disparagingly about how about how just filled with hopelessness and despair the people that work those kinds of jobs are, and how difficult they are, and how it just gets down on your soul, and we need to pay whatever. I enjoyed the book, but I kept thinking I did these jobs and it was fine. There's no problem here.
So how did you take that, Ben? What is the takeaway from reading that book that you got?
I'll tell you a quick anecdotal story. The story is there's an old man sitting on the porch of a gas station in a rocking chair in some old town. And some guy rolls up into town with like a moving van. He's got his family in the car. He gets out and walks up to the old guy on the porch and says, "Hey, I'm new to town. What's the town like around here?" And he says, "Well, what was it like in the last place you're from?" He says, "Well, the people were unfriendly and everyone was angry, and I just felt frustrated. I'm glad to get out of there." And he said, "You'll find it's about like that around here."
This is one of those...
Time passes, another car pulls up, a guy gets out, asks the same question, and then gets the same question in return. "How were things in the previous town you're from?" "Well, in the last town we're in, everyone was nice. We had lots of friends. We loved them. We were sad to see him go. We're looking forward to the new opportunity." And he said, "You'll find it's about that around here."
Life is all puppies and rainbows for Ben Rich, isn't it? Just...
No. You get what you give.
And apparently you give enough that it's a charitable contribution. No, but
so,
I get... You have to acknowledge the fact that you are a bit of an outlier when it comes to just being nice.
So I graduated from college.
Skipped right over. You see this? Like he can't even acknowledge. It is so just in him. He can't even recognize it in himself.
I'm not as exceptional as you say, Josh. I was surrounded by good people.
But this is you're so good. This is the problem. Is you're so good that whenever people are bad to you, you don't say, "Oh, that's a bad person." You're just slightly confused, like, "Oh, that poor man must be having a bad day. Let me go try to help him." Like there is so much good flowing out of you that you can't see like the lack of it in other people.
Okay, this is a story I was going to save for later, but I want to tell it now. So I learned a lesson, kind of a bad one on the podcast, that I was planning to develop a souvenir for the podcast that I would send out to our Patreon supporters and have for us, for just to have in stock for this kind of thing. That was going to be a D20 with the Bad at Magic logo on it. That's a really cool, little memento of the podcast. And I mentioned it on the last podcast that I was going to do it and send it out to people because I thought it was reaching the point of certainty. The producer that I had hired had already produced a mock-up model. They'd created a mold. They'd poured a first prototype. They'd painted it and sent me a photo. And I had all this proof that it was moving forward. And they'd obviously put some great deal of effort in it. And then, like a couple of days later, I get this sob story about family problems and never being able to fulfill my order and don't talk to me anymore. And it completely fell through. And I wanted to believe the sob story, Josh.
I know you did.
And you looked at the sob story. I sent it to you, and do you remember what you said to me?
I don't remember the exact words. It was something along the lines of, "Oh, she just regretted it and wanted to get out of it."
Yeah, it was like getting blown off. You went on a date and she didn't want to have a second date, and she makes up lame excuses instead of telling you she doesn't want to date you anymore.
And I don't remember the exact words that she used or the exact words that I said, but yeah, it was basically she realized that she had agreed to something she didn't want to commit to and backed out of it.
Yeah. So my propensity was to believe her sob story rather than to see what it was probably just an excuse. But I could be wrong. Maybe she really is having family issues. Like how bad would it be to assume she was lying to me and do something that kind of called that out and she was actually, like her mother was dying or something. That would be terrible.
Well, you don't call somebody out when they say the little lies that make society go forward. You just acknowledge that she's lying and then you move on with your life.
Right, but what if she wasn't? Anyway.
It doesn't, well, I mean, I don't think she, I think she's.
So you think that you think it doesn't matter? I can assume she's lying, but the outcome's still the same, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is the thing.
I'm just saying
that's the difference between us, Ben, is because the outcome is the same in both situations. Like the situation is.
So why not believe the good story?
Because I can't. Something about like the life experiences that I have, I'm just jaded and cynical. I don't know. I call myself a realist, and my brother called me out one time. He's like, "Yeah, that's what pessimists call themselves." But I think I'm just a realist. Like I can see your story. I can see like, oh well, she's just going through a tough time, but I don't know why. But part of me goes like, I reject the rosy version of that entirely for what probably actually happened, which is far less. I don't know.
Yeah, ridiculous. I'm a believer in Occam's razor. And I guess in this case, decided to believe what the person was telling me, default to truth, instead of believing what's most likely, which is she's not telling me the truth, but it's one of those acceptable lies in society.
Yeah. And honestly, like you said at the beginning, it doesn't matter. The only thing it changes is our outlook on the world. And that's what makes this so interesting to talk to you, is because your outlook, you're like, all right, there's an episode of 30 Rock. I don't know if you've ever watched the show. You don't watch the show.
Yeah, you've told me this anecdote before, but you haven't said it on the podcast, so go ahead.
Excellent. There's an episode where there is a person, and he is handsome, and he is dating our protagonist in the show, Liz Lemon, and she is trying to explain to him that his life is objectively better because he is handsome. And like they're in a restaurant, and he's looking at the menu, and he goes, I don't really like any of these choices. I think I'm going to order grilled cheese and a Fanta. And she goes, that's a great idea. Let's try that. And as the waitress came over, she covered his face with the menu. And she goes, excuse me, can we get a macaroni and cheese and a Fanta? And the waitress goes, okay, I'm going to come back in 3 minutes. And if you try to order off menu again, I'm going to slap you both. And then she walks off. And then she takes the menu off the guy's face. And the guy goes, why didn't she call me handsome and offer me a free dessert? So he was living in that episode. Yeah. She was describing that as living in the handsome bubble. Ben, I think you're living in the nice bubble.
Well, the story I'm trying to portray here is that all of these experiences I went through have helped me arrive at the place where I am. So let me go back and tell one real quick. So when I was working at Convergys doing technical support for Microsoft, sometimes what we would be doing is troubleshooting a problematic document. Sometimes we were educating the user. Sometimes there was actually problems with the code, whatever. In this case, a customer called us and was trying to execute a mail merge. A mail merge is where you take a data source that has a list of names and addresses in it, and then you take a form letter and you insert the names and addresses and try to print one copy per data entry in the database.
Yeah.
And it wasn't working, and there was a problem with it and stuff like that, and it got escalated to me at tier 2. And sometimes what we'll do, we'll promise the person confidentiality, and then we'll ask them to email us the document, and then we'll use it so that we can see what they're seeing and troubleshoot. Because, like I said, this is before the time of being able to control their computer. And the person had told the first line technician that they were working for the American Academy of Motion Pictures, and that this was a mail merge to send out the invitations to the Academy Awards.
Ooh, that can't possibly be true.
Now, when you hear that, you're like, yeah, that can't possibly be true.
That's exactly what I just said.
So when I received this escalated case, I said that, and then they sent me their data source. And I swear, Josh, this was the holy grail of address lists.
Every A to C list actor and actress in Hollywood at the time.
Yes. Every top-notch name and address, home address of every person you can imagine.
That's outstanding. How much did you make selling that on the dark web?
Josh, you forget who you're talking to. So,
are you violating any confidentiality agreements by telling me about it now?
Now, imagine having a lifetime of those kinds of experiences where my initial reaction to that is this person's lying to me, and then I find out for a fact that they're not, and then I'm like, well, maybe I should default the truth here. Because it's way more interesting if they're not lying.
I mean, it is more interesting, but prove it. Like, screenshot or it didn't happen. Like, and you even in this scenario, even you didn't believe it until you saw until you saw George Clooney show up in a mail merge.
Yeah. Wow, it was awesome.
So that is simultaneously like the coolest and the lamest story of all time. It's like I can see you sitting around a campfire with a bunch of beers. Boys, let me tell you about the craziest day I had at Microsoft Tech Support. I was doing this mail merge, right? And you get the hands up like you're doing the fighter jet thing. And I get the call.
It was some poor schmuck in Hollywood trying to send out invitations to the Oscars.
Next thing I know, I'm staring at Scarlett Johansson's home address on my screen. It was crazy.
Yep. Just like that. This was back before Scarlett Johansson was popular.
Yeah, no, okay. This was back when Audrey Hepburn was getting invited to the Oscars.
It's time to transition to adulthood. So I graduate from college with a degree in education, and I go to get my first job as a school teacher. I move to where they're hiring a lot of school teachers. I'm serious. Listen, when I say that, I'm not being facetious. That year, the Clark County School District hired 2,000 new teachers.
Wait, Clark County, Nevada? Isn't that where Las Vegas is? Isn't that the city of sin?
Where are you going with this?
No, that's it. I just wanted to make you acknowledge that.
It was a 6-hour drive from where I graduated from college, and they were hiring lots of teachers. And I had 2 kids and maybe one on the way. And so it was time to get a job. Now
it's time. 2 kids, third one on the way. I really probably should get a job.
Well, I just worked 3 years of tech support. So I was we moved down to Vegas. I applied at the school district, and they started their process. And while that was happening, I was saying, please, let's get a real job before I start as a school teacher. So I went and applied for lots of tech jobs. I tried to take my 3 years of tech support and turn it into a career in IT. And I just couldn't do it. I don't know why. I applied for so many jobs, and I had a couple of second interviews, and they just weren't interested in somebody fresh out of college with only 3 years of experience.
You and I were on the downward curve of the bubble for computing technology. Like right when we were entering the workforce, everybody had a degree in computers.
That makes sense. Well, and it was also a year removed from September 11th, 2001. So boiling in the back of my head was like, I want to do something patriotic for my country. So at the same time, I also went to the recruiter and started applying for officer training school.
Which is very unusual because recruiters, in my experience, don't even know what officer training school is.
It was kind of like that. They really didn't want to help me. They don't have enforced quotas that they're trying to fill for officers that already have a degree and just want to come in off the street.
Now, I want to point this out, just for a quick second. The fact that Ben applied and was accepted into the Air Force as an officer is incredibly rare. Like the two primary accession, actually, no, not even that. The three primary accession sources are either people that are already in that become officers, or people that at the very start of their education say, I'm going to dedicate myself to being an officer in the military before I even get started. For you to walk in literally off the street and become an officer is very rare.
I will not disagree with that. It is the last accession source. They don't always use it. But if they have a few leftover slots at the end, they'll give it to some poor idiot with his degree already.
Some poor teacher in Clark County, Nevada that's just living the dream.
Yeah. So I got hired by the school district, but it was going to be a few months before I started. And I was like, what can I do in the meantime? And everywhere I went, I looked around and noticed that all the palm trees were in dire need of pruning.
You're in Las Vegas, Nevada, and you thought the best temp job that you could get for the summer was trimming palm trees in the desert?
I can't remember the genesis of the idea, but I remember actually going to some lengths to find a landscaper that was willing to teach me how to do it. So I was able to dig up a guy from my church that happened to be a landscaper. And he's like, yeah, come out with me one day and I'll show you how to do it. He's like, on most trees, here's what we do. You put on this lineman's gear, and it was like a belt.
It's a big
you wore around your waist.
Listen, my dad trimmed palm trees when he was a kid. It's a big belt that goes around your waist, then throw a chain around the tree, and then you've got some spikes on your shoes that you put on and you just climb up the thing.
Yeah. And I was like, oh man, I'm all about this. That is so cool. So I went down and spent money I didn't have and bought a bunch of gear. Went down and registered as a business, printed some business cards, put on an official-looking shirt and hat, and started walking around the neighborhood telling people that I knew how to prune palm trees that I'd never done before. The first job that I got, Josh, I'm going to post a photo of this in the show notes. The first job that I got, their trees were like 60 feet tall. I don't know, maybe 50. I'm a speck up at the top of this tree, and they had 3 of them, and I was halfway up the first tree before I was already, considering my existence in the universe. I'm hanging there by the cable going, I can't even get to the top of one tree. How am I going to do this? And it was like,
that's the part where the frame freezes and you hear Ben's voice narrating. It says, it's about this point I started questioning my life choices.
Record scratch. Yeah. So, but as always, I'm not going to give up. And this tree, it was my baptism by fire. Like, are you going to do this or not? 1, it was tall, and 2, the husks on it had rotted, so that as I tried to climb it, it was like trying to go up an escalator that was going down. Every time I'd take a step, like 3 would fall off from underneath me. So it was just sliding down as I was trying to climb up. So I got up to the top of the first tree, finally got up there, and I pull out my pruning saw, and I prune off all the old fronds and make the tree look like they do, and it's just like a little green pencil tip at the top. And then I brought up a rappelling rope, and I threw it around the top of the tree, unhooked my lanyard, and rappelled down out of the tree. That was the coolest part. I was so tired I couldn't even enjoy it. I pull out the rope, and I look at the other 2 trees, and I think, there's no way I'm doing this. I can do this. So I clean up. I go knock on the door. I'm like, hey, something came up. I'll come back tomorrow and finish the other 2 trees. I went home and just crashed. And I woke up
You liar!
But I reached my low point on the first day. From there on out, I developed more, better muscles, and I learned how to do it better, and got better and better at it. So just as I was starting to get skilled at it and start to learn how to do it, then I got hired as a teacher, and I kind of put that on hold, and then I only did that during the summers when I wasn't teaching school.
I'll tell you what, Ben. Like, I thought I was a wayward soul when it came to career choices in my life. I felt like I was lost adrift at a sea of possibilities, but you make me look like I was laser focused, because holy crap, you had no idea what was going on, did you?
No, but fake it till you make it's a thing. Come on, you had to have done that on something in your life.
Fake it till you make it?
Yeah, just go out and pretend you know what you're doing until you know what you're doing.
Honestly, Ben, I've been pretty spectacular at everything I've tried so far.
All right, I'm going to think of something. I just can't off the top of my head, so I can't contradict you. All right, so about this time, I think my first summer, I find out the Air Force thing is actually starting to move, but it took a lot of effort for me to keep the recruiter moving on it. So I finally got hired into the Air Force. I finished out my first year as a school teacher, moved my family in with my in-laws, and went off to officer training school and became an officer in the United States Air Force. I was hired to be what's called an air battle manager, Air battle managers sit backseat on two types of aircraft, an AWACS or a J-STARS, and they basically look at little screens that have radars and either figure out what's going on the ground, figure out what's going on in the air, and report it to other troops that are doing the fight and manage the battle.
So, two things about that, Ben. First of all, air battle managers are a no-joke career. Like, those guys are super legit in the amount of capacity that they have to have in order to do their job well. And two, you're not an air battle manager.
Well, very observant of you, Josh. So I was at I don't think I can understate the impact of the timing. I was right at the end of the post-September 11th patriotism wave. And when I say that, I really want to set the stage here because I got into the Air Force in December of the year 2004. If you look back to when September 11th happened, all the people that were becoming officers were at the academy or going to college and maybe transferred into ROTC or whatever, and enlisted guys that transferred over. And there was this huge wave of people that wanted to be officers at the time as a show of patriotism. And they all finished school and became officers in the year 2004, which would become a theme throughout my career because that was a problem for the next 10 years.
You were Johnny come lately. That was the problem.
Right. So I was late to this wave, and I wanted to be a computer guy. I wanted to be a cyber operations officer because I couldn't get that job in the private sector, so I'll get it in the military. So I went to the recruiter, and I said, I want to be a cyber operations officer. Or at the time, they were called common information officers. And he said, we're not hiring those. And I said, did I say common information? What I actually meant was air battle manager. And he said, you're hired. So I reported.
We've talked about this before. You got the big 4F on your clipboard.
Yes, exactly. So I couldn't be an air battle manager. And my commander hooked me up, talked to a friend he had at the Military Personnel Command, and got me transferred into cyber, which was at the time the most overpopulated career in the Air Force.
So I know why. I wanted to be a comm officer as well. And I told that story at the same time. Like, they wanted to make me a developmental engineer, which I probably would have been happier doing. But I became a comm officer because I want to be cyber. The reason comm was so overpopulated at the time, Ben, is because, like you said, we were coming off the wave of the 9/11 patriotism graduations and all that. And comm officers is the most generic degree requirement in the Air Force. Like, you don't have to...
They used to make every executive officer be one, and they didn't have... It was low barrier of entry, high
need for it. High demand. But so... If you ended up not being able to cut it, like say, for example, you're an ROTC and you're in an engineering degree and you were going to go be an engineer or a pilot something, and you didn't make the cut, well, guess what? You always qualify for comm.
Yeah, which was the weird thing because you were amongst the group of guys that were guaranteed a job. On the other hand, a civilian trying to come off the street going into OTS, you're not guaranteed a job, and they weren't. I wasn't qualified for comm. They didn't want me to be in comm. They didn't need anyone in comm.
They already had too many people in comm.
Yeah.
Kind of because they ended up cutting a lot of people from our career field, which was really... Yeah, we don't have to go into that.
So one thing people might not understand in the course of a career in the military is that for officers in particular, and also for anyone that sticks around long enough, once you're into the leadership area, they're not really interested in you being a technical expert in a particular area.
They weren't interested in us being a technical expert as a second lieutenant.
I mean, when you're a pilot, they want you to know your airplane.
That's true. But that's... So that is... I actually was a pilot for a while, so I can speak educatedly on this. There's the operators, and then there's the support people. The managers. So the operators, they need to be, like you said, experts. Technical experts on the weapon system or the airframe. Whatever it is that they are working on, they are the guy. For the support people, which is everybody else, all of the manpower personnel, all of the communications, all the infrastructure, all the maintainers, all the cops, all those people, they just want you to be able to effectively manage a workforce of experts.
Yes. And so their leadership track for doing this is, let's talk about a pyramid again. I'll put this one in the show notes. They have basically this pyramid that as you move your way... As you move your way up the chain of command, there's a lot of possible entry-level jobs you could do, but they want you to move around so that you have a lot of variety in your career experience. Rather than becoming an expert in any one thing, they want you to try a lot of things, because as you move up, you gain responsibility for more and more and more people that have varied things they're responsible for, and they want you to have familiarity with all of them and just be better at being a manager and a leader of people rather than being an expert in any one thing.
Which is dumb, because it just is, all that does is justify the fact that they're going to move you around a lot, just enough to where right when you feel like you're getting comfortable that you can talk in an educated manner to the people that you're responsible for leading, they're going to pull the rug out from under you and move you to something else.
Yeah, but it's not malicious. It's not because they don't want you. Well, I don't know what they want, but it's not just to make you disoriented. It's because they want you to learn the next thing.
But pilots are all the generals anyway. They want us, the guys that are going to be like mid-level managers in the large scale of things, to have all this technical experience and breadth of knowledge and all this stuff. But the people that are at the top of this pyramid have only ever done one thing.
All right.
That's my jadedness coming out.
Rattle off your list of jobs that you had during your time in the military, if you can, off the top of your head, in a description that's accessible to a civilian.
Okay. I was in charge of the shop that designed all of the intranet web pages for a while.
Okay.
Then I was in charge of all of the communications and landing, the landing stuff. All of the lights and crap on the airfield.
Air traffic control and landing systems.
Thank you, the ADCALs. Yeah, that's what it was. I was trying to describe it for a civilian, Ben. Like the lights, the radios, all the stuff that airplanes need to land.
The localizer, the TACAN.
All the cool stuff. I know. Yeah, that stuff was so old. For a while, then I was in charge of the actual network shop, which ran the servers and the base infrastructure. I was never in charge of the telephone shop, which was sad because I was genuinely interested in the telephone switch and how that thing worked.
So, for our listeners, all these jobs Josh described are jobs he had when I was also in the same unit as him. We were both in the same unit at the same time. This is when we met. This is when we knew each other. And so we were both lieutenants in the same unit. As we were moving around doing all these jobs, we were friends, but we never really overlapped in a functional way where we worked together.
No, we saw each other all the time, and we worked the same job at different times, a bunch of times. But we never, it never overlapped. We're never working in the same office.
Hello, friends. Future Ben here. I have to break in and interject a bit because, frankly, I got a bit carried away. Josh reminded me that it's probably best if we keep our podcast under 2 hours. So, in the interest of time here, I'm going to edit out the next bit where we started talking about our military careers, and we'll save that for some other time. It's also where I started getting a bit of the lessons we've learned, and I don't want to miss that, but we're going to save it for another time. So I'm going to give in to Josh's better instincts here, and we're going to skip ahead to the end. Sorry for the interruption. Thanks.
This is going to have to be a two-parter. We're going to have to discuss this for a half hour on the next episode. Just accept it.
Okay. All right, folks. Thanks for listening to the Bad Magic Podcast. As you heard me throughout the podcast, I said time and time again, that will be in the show notes. I promise it will. If it's an image, what I'll do is I'll create an album on our Facebook page. So go join our Facebook page, like our Facebook page. With every episode comes out an album full of photos of me and Josh, images of things we talked about, and sometimes I Photoshop crazy stuff. If you look in last week's episode, you might find a hidden picture of Bernie Sanders wearing the mittens. And you can support us on our Patreon page at patreon.com/badatmagic, or you can go on the subreddit and join in the discussion if you have things that you want to say. Thanks for listening to the Bad at Magic podcast.
Yes, if you like what we do, share us with a friend. If you can't get enough of us, go on Patreon like Ben just said. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time.